I've got another question here, which is from Kristen Smith, the founder of the Blockchain Association. Thank you, Kristen. Her question, there's two questions here. So I think one is, if you could have a government agency take one action to support the adoption of USDC, what would that action be? And the second question was, some policymakers want to see the US adopt a central bank digital dollar. How does this fit with USDC in terms of this policy goal? This is something that we've touched on in other episodes of the money movement, but it remains a really important topic. So in terms of an action of a government agency, I think the really critical thing right now is financial institutions, whether they be fintechs that, hundreds of millions of users and tens of millions of individuals in the US depend on, or traditional banks, they need to see a path to using this in their infrastructure, to see protocols like USDC on public chains as a stored value financial instrument that they can have on a balance sheet, that they can store, that they can use, and as a payment infrastructure. And so I think from my perspective, a really key thing would be clarity from perhaps the OCC around how the financial industry in the United States can actually interact with and utilize something like USDC. I think that's really critical. I think that's going to be critical as well for Libra and associated stablecoins from Libra. And so that's I think at the top of my list. The second question, which was sort of policymakers want to see the U.S. adopt a central bank digital dollar. How does this fit? So I kind of look at these things on different timelines. I think right now there's one timeline, which is there's a huge amount of innovation in public blockchain infrastructure. There's a huge amount of private sector innovation around these types of digital dollar stablecoins and the standards for those and the governance models around them and the risk management around them. So there's a huge amount of private sector work that's going on there, and that's accelerating. And that's one time frame. And so you can imagine what that might look like in 2 or 3 years, and it could be quite significant in scale. On the other hand, we have, I think, very important considerations from policymakers, very important work being done by many different groups at the Federal Reserve, looking at what is the federal government's role in digital currency in the future. And I think probably what we envision is that some point in the future, perhaps in 2 years, perhaps in 3 years, maybe faster, maybe slower, these things are going to meet. And you're going to see sort of the broad kind of industry-driven arrangements, not just in the U.S., but we envision protocols like USDC being adopted by many jurisdictions for other digital currencies with standards around them. So in many places, not just in the U.S., we're going to see that the central banks are going to want to have some supervisory relationship with those arrangements, and likely some relationship to the underlying reserves. And so the reserves that back a USDC, maybe eventually those are held with the Fed instead of within the commercial banking system. So those are questions that need to be thought of and addressed, and I think we'll see develop in parallel, and ultimately, I think in a highly constructive, complementary fashion over the next 2 to 3 years.